This guy, Bubba Copeland, so he was a pastor and mayor in this small town, Smith Station, Alabama. And turns out the entire time that he was mayor and pastor of the Phoenix City First Baptist Church in neighboring Phoenix City, he was secretly had this double life and was making all kinds of sissy transgender porn, dressing as a woman, taking photos of himself, posting to all of these different trans and gender erotica, sissy porn sites on Reddit, boards on Reddit. And he didn't stop there. He didn't stop just with the pictures of himself. He was also writing and posting the most disgusting, objectively disgusting, morally bankrupt, filthy, disturbingly evil porn. He was writing stories about murdering real women that he knew in his town, and so that he could transition into looking just like them and take their place and trick their husband into having sex with him. These are women that he was friends with, that his wife was friends with. He posted these women's pictures on porn sites with their real name, used the real name of their businesses. Some of these women, these victims, have now spoken to the news, the only news that will cover this, which is one local TV station down there, WTVM. They've covered it. The Daily Mail's covered it. 1819 News, which is a conservative outlet, has covered it, and Redux has covered it. Oh, and the New York Post just picked it up. 5 outlets. But these 2 of his victims spoke with WTVM News and said, look, my image and my name are on like 9 porn sites now. I'm still dealing with this. He also took pictures of little children, boys and girls from his hometown, without their knowledge, and he made porn images with them where he fantasized about little boys turning into little girls. This was what got him off. He posted this in porn forums called gender erotica. Okay, that's a combination of gender transitioning, gender ideology, and erotica. That's for guys, these autogynophiles who call themselves trans, but they're really just perverts who get off on imagining themselves as women. That's what makes them come. And they get off on imagining little boys turning into girls. He posted other porn about little boys. He would post pictures of local children in his town with things that said, take the hormones, become a whore. The parents of one of these kids found out about it when it was reported on 1819 News and saw his kid's face on there. 1819 News didn't even know it was a real kid from his town until the dad contacted them and was like, can you please blur the image? That's my kid. So this pastor and mayor was leading this double life, was victimizing secretly women and children in his town, was getting up there every Sunday in that pulpit. And you can go watch his sermons on the Phoenix City Baptist Church YouTube channel. He was getting up there every Sunday and pretending to be a good shepherd for this church while he lived in depraved sin. And what I've seen happen since this story came out, well, 2 things. One thing, the story came out because 1819 News covered it. They're a conservative outlet. And after they covered it, this guy went up in the pulpit on Sunday again. You can watch his last sermon. Went up in the pulpit and boldly and arrogantly, full of himself, told his congregation that he was the subject of an internet attack and that he and his wife were just posting things. He was posting things with his wife's knowledge, just to have a bit of fun, like humor, and that he has nothing to be ashamed of. He said that. He said that. When your darkness is revealed to you and to the rest of the world in this case, You have an opportunity if you are a professed believer like he was. Okay, I'm not talking to the non-believers here. I know there's non-believers in the audience. I'm talking to Christians. You have an opportunity from God to humble yourself finally. It should be. It's like your rock bottom moment, okay? I've had a rock bottom moment. I've had 2. One of them is when I found God. When you hit that rock bottom, you have an opportunity to humble yourself and cry out for help from something bigger than you. To beg forgiveness for your sins, for your wrongdoings. To admit, to take responsibility for what you've done wrong, and to ask for help and say, "I can't fix this on my own. I need help. Are you there, God? Does God exist?" That was what I asked during my first rock bottom moment. This pastor didn't do that. He didn't get up there on his last Sunday sermon, and he didn't get down on his knees and beg for forgiveness from his congregation who he deceived for years, leading them astray. Like the Pharisees, like the whitewashed tombs in the Bible. That's what this pervert was doing every Sunday, leading them astray. Somebody who's been defending him online said to me, well, he never preached about against any of the things he was doing in secret. So it's fine. He's not a hypocrite because he never preached against any of those things. Are you freaking kidding me? That's the problem. That's the point. He wasn't preaching from the Bible. He was leading his congregation astray. And so he got up there in his last sermon, said he had nothing to be ashamed of, and then he killed himself 2 days later. So you did have a lot of shame, didn't you? And you had a huge ego, didn't you? You couldn't bring yourself to accept what you did, to accept responsibility for it, to humble yourself, to allow God to forgive you. God can forgive all things. He can even forgive that depravity and what you were doing. He could have forgiven all of that if you had humbled yourself and said, I messed up on this extraordinary scale. Can you help me? I'm ashamed. He didn't do that. He'd rather take himself out of this world because he doesn't actually believe God's capable of forgiving that. And he's not willing to admit he did anything wrong. And so you know what happened after this? After he killed himself? All the mainstream news did articles and headlines. The Washington Post, all of them, CBS, NBC, all of them. Oh, grief follows. I think one of the headlines was grief follows this pastor's suicide. And offers a warning of the dangers of anti-LGBTQ rhetoric. What? There are all of them, including celebrities like George Takei. They're ignoring all of the porn he was writing about murdering local women. They're ignoring the images he used in disgusting transition porn with children from his town. They're ignoring the porn he posted with names and images from the women in his town. They're just talking about the cross-dressing. Okay, because I'm bringing this back home to the subject. Because in woke, they see the cross-dressing and they go, he's in a marginalized community. Oh, he must be trans. They're calling him a trans woman. He said he wasn't trans when he was exposed. He said, I wasn't trans. This was something he did at home to relieve stress and to have a bit of humor. But it doesn't matter if he's trans or not. What he was doing was vile and depraved and immoral and an abuse of trust and an abuse of those women and children he was taking advantage of and putting up on the internet so that him and other perverts could masturbate to them. And doing it while pretending to be a good shepherd in a Christian church and to have beliefs. He doesn't have any beliefs. This guy was living in sin. He didn't. Somebody said to me, the reason I'm so outraged is because I think this ideology has made such an intrusion into the mainstream that there are people who've bought into this idea. I can't judge any behavior. I can't judge it, especially if he's in a protected group. He's in a marginalized group. There are left-wing sites like Occupy Democrats now. They are posting They are posting podcast interviews with people defending him, and they are not telling their viewers on the left in their bubble, they're not telling them about the porn he was writing and the images he was using of women and children. Why? They're keeping that information from them, and they're seriously presenting this guy as like, "Oh, he's a poor trans woman, innocent trans woman who killed himself because he got outed as a trans woman." No, that is not the story. He killed himself because he was overcome with shame and couldn't get out of his own ego enough to ask forgiveness for his perverted, depraved behavior and lifestyle, for his double life. The warning of the danger that comes from this story, that headline would be better written if it said, "Warning of the dangers of porn addiction, gender ideology, and leading a double life." That's what this story is about. But all over the internet, people who've only read about the cross-dressing part are currently lecturing others. Can you imagine left-wing sites defending this pastor? There's photos of this pastor and mayor with Trump, okay? Bubba Copeland took photos with Trump. He was a conservative. He was a white Christian man and a pastor. Can you imagine the left giving up an opportunity to dunk on hypocrisy from a white Christian male Republican Trumper pastor? They're giving up that opportunity to dunk on him. Why? Oh, because he cross-dressed in secret. So now they're whitewashing all of his behavior. They're whitewashing all of it. There's a reason Jesus called it whitewashed tombs. This man was a whitewashed tomb, standing up there pretending to be one thing, wearing a mask, while he was the exact opposite at home. For how long was he doing that? Years. Okay, so now there are reports coming out, anonymous reports coming out in some of the Facebook groups about this from locals who are saying, "Hey, he also sexually abused me or someone I know when he was pastor of the youth group." So now there are anonymous reports coming out about this. None of those, as far as I know, have talked to the press yet. I hope they do. They're anonymous reports, so don't put any stock in them. I'm good with that caveat. But there are people saying, "Oh, the reason he took his own life was because there's also a lot more that hasn't come out yet." And meanwhile, the people defending him and running cover for him, they don't want anything to come out. And they're like, "If you talk about this, you're a transphobe. If you talk about any of the things he was doing, you're a transphobe, and you're, anti-LGBTQ, and you're a bigot." Wrong. Do you think gay people or trans people, people who have experienced gender dysphoria, this idea that this feeling that they're in the wrong body, do you think they deserve to carry the weight of this man's sins and behavior so that they can be used as a deflector shield for criticism of this man's perversion? Why are you going to put that on their shoulders? Screw you. He's responsible for his behavior. Sorry, I have a lot of anger about this case. You you can tell. I haven't been this upset about something in a long time, and I think it's because he was a pastor, because he was leading his flock astray, and I've seen people in some of these forums who are saying that they are having a crisis of faith now because of this monster, and because of the people who claim to be Christian who are covering up his sins. How dare you? This is why Jesus said in the Bible, "If anyone leads any of these little ones, those who believe in me, astray, it would be better for them if a millstone were tied around their ankle and they were thrown into the sea." Jesus said that. Jesus said that. Do you know why? That's how angry wolves in shepherd's clothing made him. What he was saying there is that horrible fate, having a millstone tied around their ankle and being thrown into the sea, is better for them than what's actually awaiting them. What was awaiting Bubba Copeland. There are people in some of these groups who claim to be Christian who have been swayed by or adopted this leftist idea that we can't make a moral judgment on his behavior. A moral judgment's wrong. I believe some of them probably have the gut instinct of revulsion when they look at this porn that he was making, this trans porn, this porn that was fetishizing little boys transitioning. He was wanking and getting off to the idea of little boys transitioning. And if you look at any of that disgusting depravity he was posting or the stories he was posting, I don't you would have to be very far gone not to have that revulsion, that natural instinct at revulsion. You would have to be as far gone as him in the darkness. And I'm concerned with the people who aren't that far gone in the darkness. People who, though, have allowed this idea to seep into them where they feel like they've been programmed that they have to get rid of any natural instinct at revulsion, moral revulsion or judgment, because if they because that's somehow a sign that they're a bigot or they're transphobic. It's not. It exists for a reason. It's like a predator detection system, and it's a guardrail for you in your life so that you don't fall into depraved behavior. I'll tell you a personal example. When I was a non-believer, I had adopted this idea that, like, making moral judgments is wrong, and being in the woke cult, like any cult, it's a matter of degrees. It happens slowly. You move into it slowly, you accept new things slowly. It's not all at once. And so over time, I was in it for 2 decades. I had accepted this idea that, you know, that religion, that Christianity in particular was somehow it was so backwards and judgmental and, um, that it was bad to declare certain behaviors immoral. Leftists believe this, some of them do. While at the same time, there's that cognitive dissonance because they believe things are immoral. They believe racism is immoral and sexism is immoral, and they believe it's immoral to pass moral judgment, right? Weird, right? But so I had adopted that over time. And one thing that happens if you adopt that over time is that you yourself will start to engage in behavior that you never could have seen yourself engaging in, or that you never would have thought you would do. And I think that's because your idea of what's right and wrong isn't hinged on anything anymore. At least it wasn't for me. And you're encouraged to question things like, well, why is that considered wrong or immoral? And to justify things. I just want to highlight this from Brahma Bull because I this is spot on. He says, Christ didn't hang out with prostitutes and criminals. He converted them and told them to sin no more. That wasn't acceptance of the sin. Yes, thank you. He loved them, and because he loved them, he told them the truth. When you love someone, you tell them the truth. Um, but the point I was making, yeah, so if you stay there long enough in that place of moral relativity, you will start to bend the rules. You will start to you if you don't have any guardrails, what's to stop you from that slow slide into evil? What is to stop you? Someone was arguing with me online, someone who is a frequent commenter on my page. I like a lot of stuff they've said in the past. I respect them, but this argument, um, they're a non-believer, and so they were saying, they disagree with me when I've said in the past that if a person worships reason, they're just worshiping themselves. And so that relates to this topic. So I just wanted to pull that out and talk about that for a second. Not every atheist worships reason. I was talking about people who specifically say they do. So some people I've met say they worship reason. They say that's their higher power. That's the thing bigger than them. That's they determine all of their morals through reason. Okay. Hmm. I would say that if you're worshiping if you think you're worshiping reason, you're worshiping your own ability to reason. So you're worshiping yourself. I saw this happen with someone I knew who said they worshiped reason. I thought they weren't capable of things that they turned out to be capable of. Lying, cheating, backstabbing, horrible things. Stealing, horribly immoral things. And I tried to understand it, and over time, I think what I realized is that, oh, they were able to justify and reason all of this out, why it was okay to do this. Because they told me reason was their higher power or the thing that they worshiped, that they put at the top, right? Instead of God, they put reason there. So they just reasoned it out. It's okay to do this immoral thing because reason is what determines my morals, right? And I can reason out why it's okay to do it. That's what happened. And so what I was saying with this person who was arguing with me, in my comments was God provides a guardrail. God is Chesterson's fence, okay? God is, there's what's it called? Anecdote about Chesterson's fence where if you see a fence, don't start pulling out the fence post until you know why the fence is there. Something bad might happen, right? What's the fence there to keep out, right? God functions as if a person's sincere and they believe sincerely, God functions as that fence post. It's something higher than you that your morality stems from. It's not you deciding. It's written down in the Bible. It's not you deciding. And it is wrong of you to be flexible with God's rules. It's not coming from you. It's not dependent on your ability to justify it and rationalize it. And now what this person was saying to me is, yeah, but there are lots of people who've used God to justify bad behavior. Yes, of course. Yes, yes. I've always say that. That's why I'm so angered by this story about this pastor. That's why I spend so much time talking about con artists in the faith. They are revolting to me. Yes, there are con artists. I'm not talking about them. Set them aside. I'm talking about sincere believers. If you have a sincere belief in God, who's something higher than you, that your morality comes from, if you're a Christian who's looking at the Bible and saying, these things mean something, I'm going to try and hold myself to this. You're going to fail. You're going to stumble. We all sin, but you're not going to be able to live in sin. The Holy Ghost won't let you. You're not going to be able to do what this pastor Bubba Copeland was doing. The Holy Ghost won't let you. You might stumble, but you're not going to live in sin. Somebody on one of these forums tried to tell me, he just made a mistake. Why is everyone going? He just made a mistake. No, no, a mistake is forgetting to lock your house when you leave. Like he did not make a mistake. He didn't have one or two dalliances with this kind of porn and then repent and beg for help and do the responsible thing and step down from his position as pastor and get help from elders in his church. He didn't do that. He lived in that sin. He lived in it. It was who he was. It was what he worshiped, himself and this depravity. If you sincerely have a belief in what you say you believe when you're a Christian, you cannot live in the sin. Because you worship God, because you're owned by God. God owns you, not the devil. You're a slave to God. And the thought of rejecting God's grace and forgiveness and staying there in that place of rejection of it while you live in that sin, it's intolerable. So, yeah, a bit of levity. A bit of levity from Tree Surgeon. Sorry, we need one. Tree Surgeon says, "Whoops, I watched CP again." Yeah, that's how they're presenting this pastor. Whew, he just made a mistake. He just made a mistake. What? Oh, man, I'm emotionally disturbed by the story. Clearly, it continues to bother me. It's a good thing. Look, the silver lining, it's a good thing because it's helping me. I'm learning a lot and it's helping me articulate some thoughts on this about morality and the benefits of having a sincere belief in a creator who set out a list of divine rules, guidelines, because he loves us so much that he wants us to follow. Not because he's some authoritarian dictator who's like, I'm going to take away their fun. No, because he's trying to point us towards the best, most joyful, beautiful way of living. So that we don't have to learn these things like I did by testing the boundaries when I was woke and living without God and testing all the boundaries of morality and learning the hard way about why these things are things you shouldn't do. Someone else said to me during this argument about this pastor, they said to me and some of the people who were calling out his behavior, they said, "Oh, you bunch of self-righteous, moral what's in your closet? What kind of if how would you like it if your skeletons were pulled out? Oh, you just bunch of self-righteous." But no, you don't get it. It's not self-righteous as a Christian to have a standard by that we hold ourselves to and our pastors to. That standard God gave us. It doesn't come from us. It's not self-righteous. It's God's righteousness, and we're trying to hold ourselves to it. You know why? Because we are weak and broken, sinful people. That's why it's important that I hold myself and my leaders to that. It's because I am do you understand? It's not because I'm some great moral creature. It's because I'm not. It's because I'm not. Duh. I'm kind of laughing because it's kind of astounding to me, the people and the other that don't get it. We have these standards. I take this very seriously and try to hold myself to it, and of course I hold my pastors to it, because without it, I know what evil I'm capable of. Oh my goodness, do I know. You are self-righteous person who thinks you don't need God or something bigger than yourself, whatever that is that you hold yourself to, something outside of yourself. You are self-righteous. You think you're just so great and moral. You're such a good, special human. You're created differently than us that you don't need that. You're just evolved. You're so evolved and smart and moral on your own. No, you're not. I'm sorry, but you're not. You're not any different than us. And man, you are in dangerous waters like I used to be in. You're in dangerous waters if you think you can just reason your own way into some morality and set up your own guardrails and make sure you don't become this monster and doing things that you think are wrong. Like, what is to stop you? What is to stop you? There's nothing bigger than you, right? I told that person, I was like, yeah, skeletons in my closet. Yeah. I watched porn. I was sexually immoral. I was an alcoholic. Yeah. I lived in a lot of sin when I didn't have God. A lot of sin. You got me. It's so dumb. What was in your past? Yes, lots of sin. It's like you don't even get it. It's hard to have a conversation with some non-believers, not all. There are some non-believers who they even though they don't believe in God, but they understand the distinctions that believers have between, like, I mean, the Bible talks about your old self and putting on the new self. You're born again. God forgives all of that sin, all of that depravity. He could have forgiven the depravity of this pastor. And when you're a Christian, yes, you will sin. You will still sin. You will stumble. You might even live in a sin for a period of time, and but God will bother you about it unless you totally turn your face away from him. He will bother you about it. And this is why it's so important, if you're a Christian, that you have good, upstanding men in these positions of leadership as your elders, as your pastor, because you have to have someone, another believer. You you need them to help, to pray for you, to help hold you accountable when they see you stumbling. You need these people. Shame on Bubba Copeland, and shame on anyone in that church who knew what he was doing and did not take it to the elders. I think that's enough ranting. Like I said, I am working on a video about, I just wanna do a concise video with the facts of this story, this specific story, Bubba Copeland story, because the mainstream media is ignoring it, and I think that's troublesome. Wikipedia is editing it. If you go and try to put these facts in there, they edit it. They take it out. They say, "Oh, the sources you are using are not on they're on our deprecated source list. Oh, that looks like a conservative site." Well, yeah, that's convenient, isn't it? If the mainstream news won't report on it, then it won't be allowed to be in Wikipedia. Wow, that's a think about how, apply that to the COVID years, like, pretty easy to censor information you don't want out there if you just decide you're only gonna allow things to be up if they're reported by CNN.